Let's revisit the Ingest view to explore all the different buttons, to find out what they do, what options you have to tag and ingest your elements. First off, let us import some files. In this example we have a few movie files, and a folder that contains an image sequence. Das element will automatically take care of sequences for you. After the preview generation is done, we can now start tagging the elements. First we choose the category from the hierarchy tree. And then we add the tags. Everybody has a different understanding of how categories are supposed to be called. If we search for some synonym, we will always end up with the correct tags. An easy way to copy the category and the tags from one element onto another is to use the copy and paste buttons. If you want to change the category for all the list items at once, simply go to the top and change the category for all items. The same applies to the tags. To change the tags for all elements can be useful if you know that all the elements originate from one specific vendor or project. To clear the categories for all the elements, all you have to do is to click the Clear Categories of All Items button. Again, the same applies to the tags. To select multiple rows at once, simply Control-click the elements. For macOS, it will be Command and click. Now you can change the category for all selected items at once. As you can see, the change only affects these two items. The same behavior applies for the transcoding mappings, the categories, and the tags. There are three types of media formats. You can either have a sequence of files, a movie file, or a single image file. For sequences and movie files, you will get a film strip preview. For a single image, there is only the thumbnail. On the right side you can see the information about the elements, like the first and last frame, as well as the resolution. You will also get the color space of the element, and the number of channels. Additionally, for movie files, there is the frame rate and the video codec. Now, let's have a closer look at one list item. As mentioned before, Control-clicking the item will select and unselect, as indicated by the blue box. At the top you see the source file path. On the right side, you can use the Copy to Clipboard button to get that path. To open up the source folder, simply click the Open in Explorer button, which will bring up the Explorer windows. You can deactivate an item. As long as an item is deactivated, changes will no longer affect that particular item. To remove an list item, simply click the Delete button. After setting the categories and tags, we ingest the item. You will notice the little dots, which indicate the status of the ingest step that is currently performed. First it registers the element to the database. Then it will process the main file. As the final step, all the transcoding tasks for the proxy generation will be executed. Here you can see the element name that is stored in the database. Again, the Open in Explorer brings up the location on the file system. Here you can see the different proxy formats which have been rendered. The green icon shows us that the element was successfully ingested. If we load the same file into the ingest list, it tells us that this file is already ingested. It gives us the element name from the database. And again, we can explore the files. What will happen if we have a sequence of files that is missing some frames? The software immediately tells us that there is something wrong with that element. On the right side, we can see a warning that some frames are missing. By clicking the warning button, it will copy the missing frame numbers to the clipboard. In the file path at the top, you see the existing frames. Even in the film strip, it indicates with a big red cross that there are some frames missing from the sequence. Using the filter bar at the top can come in quite handy from time to time. Here we have two elements with the word fire in the file name. If we search for fire, it will filter out all the other items. At the bottom right corner, you will find the disregarded list. Here you can see that it did apply the filter, as indicated by the help text and the little filter icon on the left. You can also invert the filter, the reverse what you are looking for. This can be very helpful if you want to filter out files with a specific file type or naming. For example, proxy files which you don't want to ingest. Let's check out the little numbers at the bottom left. The number 6 is the total number of list items. One item will be ingested without any issues. That is the one up here. One item is already ingested. It can be re-ingested, but it still gives us a warning. One item is currently disabled. That is the one in the middle. It can be activated if needed. 3 items are disregarded due to an error, or because the filter applies. If you open up the disregarded list, you can see that for the first item it failed to create a preview. For the second file path, the filter applies. And the last one is not a valid media file type. That is why it gets ignored. Sometimes it is helpful to get the file path of these elements. Either get the single file path of an item, or you can use the button at the top to copy all file paths into the clipboard. In some cases you want to stop the running tasks that are currently in process. Simply click the Stop button on the top right corner to interrupt the preview generation. The items will be deactivated, but you have the option to render individual previews if needed. The same applies if you want to stop the auto-tagging. All the jobs will be stopped and the results of what has been finished so far will be set. There are different types of file sequences. In this example we have 2 folders. One contains images of the different views for a HDR sphere. The files are named sequentially. In the other folder, there are reference textures which are also named sequentially, but they are independent files. For both folders the image sequences will be detected. For the HDR sequence that will be fine. But for the textures, that could cause an issue, because we want to have each file as a separate element in the library. Each sequence has an option called Split Sequence to Single Files. Now we have the files as individual elements. By default, the software tries to detect file sequences. But you have the option to disable this behavior. Simply toggle the option box to disable it. If we now load our textures, they will be split into single items right away. Each time you click the Ingest Elements button, it will save the current state of the ingest list into a text file on disk. By default, all the ingest logs are saved into the same folder where the library config file is saved. Inside the Ingest Logs folder, you find a history of all the ingests that were ever made into this library. The ingest logs are a simple CSV file that are sorted by date and time. Let's have a closer look at one of these files. In the first row we can see that there are 3 columns. We have path, category, and tags. They are separated by a semicolon. The same applies to the actual data. Here we see the file path, followed by a semicolon, the category ID and all the tags. You will find a button on the bottom left corner. This can be used to load these ingest logs. It will populate the ingest list to set all the element with the categories and tags. This can be very helpful if something failed during the ingest. You also have a history of everything that was ever ingested, which some feature film production require for security reasons. Sometimes the generation of the previews might take a while. You can deactivate the preview generation by clicking the checkbox for Create Temp Previews. As you see, it will not generate the previews, but it will load all the file data. You always have the option to generate the preview for single items. This can speed up the processes of loading a huge amount of files, if you already know what you are going to tag them.